Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we're implementing moving platforms. We're actually going to make this platform move by understanding something called the game loop and how the tick function in C++ relates to it. Let's dive in and find out. So up until this point, we have been ignoring this function here, the tick function. We've been putting everything in begin play because that's what we've used before in Blueprint. But let's shed a little bit of light on this tick function. To understand tick, we need to understand the concept of a game loop. And this is how most game engines will build their engine. The way it works is that first of all, the game engine will take the input from the player. So whatever's currently happening, whether the spacebar is down or whether it's the W key, whether the mouse has just moved a little bit, whether a mouse button is down, all that stuff's going to be taken in by the game engine and processed. Then the next thing is that information will be used to update the game state. Maybe the player will move forward a little bit. Maybe a ball will bounce. All that sort of stuff will be calculated and physics engines run and all that sort of great stuff that we've seen in our previous games. And then the third step is that the game engine will take the game state and say, okay, well, the player's here and the camera's here. The ball is over there, and it will render it to the display. It will turn it from a set of numbers into an image to display on your screen. Now, that image is called a frame being a single picture in a series of pictures that make up a video. Now, your computer may be able to render lots and lots of frames a second, or it might render fewer, but that is called the frame rate. How many frames per second can your computer go through the game loop? How often can it process input, update state, and render it out? That is the frames per second. And in Unreal, we use the tick function to help us do the middle step of the game loop, to help us update the state of our game. It is a function that gets called every frame, and it exists in Blueprint as well as an event. So you get the tick event, and it basically allows you to do something to update your game every single frame. Now, in our case, what we want to do with this is allow it to move our platform. So how could we do that? Well, if we take our set actor location and remove it from begin play, and instead we update that location in tick. That's going to not do very much initially because we'll just be setting, constantly updating our location to the same location. If we do set actor location my vector and then semicolon, that's just every single frame, every single iteration through the game loop, it's just going to put the actor in the same place. However, where this gets interesting is if we update the value inside of my vector. So what we can do is we could say my vector dot z is equal to my vector dot z plus 1. So what we're doing here is we're taking the value that currently resides in myVector.z, we are adding 1 to it, and then we are taking that whole result and putting it back into myVector.z. So every single time we go through this game loop and tick is called by the Unreal Engine, myVector.z should be increasing by 1. So let's see what the result of this is. We go into Unreal and we hit the compile button, and then we go ahead and hit play. We should see that that platform is rising up, floating up into the air because I'm increasing its Z location. So I'm making it go higher and higher. So I'd like you to have a go at changing Y instead of changing Z. So change the correct line of code. You may need to change this in more than one place. Resize the platform cube so that it is a good platform for you to jump on, and see if now updating Y instead of updating Z allows you to jump onto the platform. Pause the video and have a go. Okay, welcome back. So let's dive into Visual Studio Code, and what we want to do is be setting myVector.y equal to myVector.y plus 1. So that's going to be moving it along the Y axis instead of the Z axis. And then we're going to be setting the location every frame to the result that is stored in the myVector variable. So we'll go back into Unreal and make sure we compile. Then we're going to search the outliner for the moving platform and select it. Go to the details pane. And in here, we want to basically, well, let's double click on the platform so we can see it. And then we want to scale it up a little bit. So I'm going to use the scale tool with the R key, and I'm going to increase the Y scale and the X scale and decrease the Z scale. So my platform's a little bit shorter like so. Then we're going to, might as well save the level, hit play, and the platform is floating off to my right. So it's also bigger, which means that I can come up and stand on it. And there we go. We've got our first little bit of a game mechanic. We've got a moving platform. It doesn't go backwards and forwards. We're going to figure out a little bit more about that in upcoming lectures. But for now, we've actually implemented some game functionality in C++. I think you should be very proud of yourself at this moment. Pat yourself on the back, and I'll see you in the next lecture.